Okay, well, I think we can probably get started. So welcome everyone to the February 2026 demo day. Alex is going to get us started with some rundown of a few new features on the website. So I'll hand it over to Alex.
So yeah, I'll show 3 items today, with the first one already being available in the test environment, so it'll definitely be going out with the next production release. And the other 2 are in flight, but expected to hit the test environment very shortly, probably by the end of the week. So first up is we've got some updates to the scheduling board in the production module. We've got 2 items here that you can see. So first we have this work order number field with a search button. So I could enter a work order number here, 3162, and if I hit enter or click search, it'll zoom me over to that work order, and it kind of faded out everything that wasn't this and applied a dark border there over that one. So just to kind of show it again, and eventually both the fade out of the other items and then the border on this one, they do fade over time, so you're not stuck that way. 6.2. Right. Yep, so you can see fade and the borders there. And the second item is we now have, you can see this grayed out block here. We now support the non-working days and holidays as specified in mc.control, which will prevent you from, well, kind of provide you a warning if you try to schedule something for a non-working day. So we'll try to drag something over here. We can drag it into the non-working day. And so it'll warn you, say, hey, there's a possible conflict here, and you can click cancel, or you can go ahead and schedule it anyway if you know that that is actually an intentional thing. And the same will happen if you try to move an item that's already scheduled. You'll get the same kind of warning. And there's some more things in here too. So if I were to like drag this, so it'll push other items out, it'll let you know, hey, these items are being forced out, and they will now fall on non-working days. So you can always cancel it or go ahead and schedule it anyway. Next up, in point of sale, we now have the new support for setting point of sale into offline mode within the app. Previously, you would have to go into your browser tools or your device's network settings and actually force your browser tab to be offline. But now we also support changing that setting within the app. So if you click on the online offline indicator, in addition to the option to refresh your caches, you have this offline mode force toggle, and you'll see as soon as I click it, the little indicator says that I'm offline. And so now if I were to proceed, the application will function as if I was offline. So you see slightly different search results because the algorithm being run is slightly different, and some other things like that. And finally,
Just to be clear, I think
ahead.
the use case on that offline mode is we had a particular customer that had, I believe, some devices in a warehouse where the connectivity was not great. And they were finding that the application actually performed better when they went into offline mode, because then they could just be using the cached customer and part data and not worry about things being kind of online and kind of offline. So that was the main impetus for that, I think.
Yep. Yeah. And finally, I believe Andrew will, in a little bit, be introducing some changes made to Rover Desktop and the Rover application in general about handling of part categories. And we have updated web to support that as well. So now you're able to have multi-level category trees in Rover and in Rover Web. So if I were to open up this dropdown, you'll see a lot of the old categories that we had, but then you'll see a couple here with a little arrow. So I can do that, I can expand, and I can see that I have multiple categories there. And then this one even has a few levels deep with the same category. So I can select that, and it'll run the search for that part, or for that category. Likewise, if I were to click this categories, you can see our new categories down here at the bottom, and I can drill down through that just the same. So very cool feature that we've had with some integrations, and now we've got it in Rover as well. So with that, if there aren't any questions, I believe I can hand it over to Andrew for some more info on that.
Going once, going twice. I'm stealing the screen. All right, so to tag on to the end of that with Alex, in the past, we've had cat control in Rover. And it's just a single control file, pretty flat category, very simplistic. It still exists. If you try and launch it, you get a little deprecation notice saying, hey, this has been moved. Please use cat.e, which I'm going to get to in a minute. So just a warning, and then you go past it, and it's still here. And this is still getting populated so that legacy customizations, right? We're not breaking any of that stuff. We're still providing data in the same spot. But this is now non-editable. So it gets handled on the background, and then we get these nice new cat.e with all these options. I'll go over this more in detail on the mod call next week internally, so we can go over the changes and things to look out for. But all right, we can essentially, with cat.e, create what is that tree structure that Alex showed off in point of sale. And then there are a lot of reports that are affected there. So that's the new category stuff. Like I said, more detail for engineers next week. The next big thing that just came through this week, we've had an issue here for a little bit with email client integration, specifically with Outlook and even 64-bit Thunderbird for a few customers. Microsoft is shipping 2 versions of Outlook because they like to keep life simple. They have a classic version and what they call a new version. The interface we were using has been deprecated in the new version, causing us pain, gnashing of teeth, great sadness, but it's fixed now. So now we're using a standard EML file and letting Windows kind of handle it. So right now I'm set to Thunderbird. And if I run the simple report to email, hit run process, accept the defaults, it's going to launch a new draft. And okay, my Thunderbird is not set up anymore. Cool. Let's just switch it to old trusty Outlook Classic, set as default, run this again, formatting. And there's my draft. I'm in Outlook Classic. This has always worked, right? Nothing crazy here. However, let's save changes. No, thank you. I've had about 1 million drafts in my draft folder this week. If I switch it to the new Outlook, this did not work last week. I say run process, accept it, wait for it, and here's my draft in the new Outlook with my attachment. And I have full access to my contacts, everything. Like I said, this will work with Thunderbird. I just happen to not have mine set up anymore. And there should not be any issue between 32-bit Thunderbird or 64-bit Thunderbird. They both work just fine because we're letting Windows handle most of the heavy lifting here. So nice quality of life improvement here. And I think, is Mike up for the big reveal or is it Greg? Who's next?
I think I'm up next. But that email update will require an ACE upgrade. Is that right, Andrew?
Correct. And then the category stuff is an M3 upgrade. Good call out.
Okay. And while we're talking .NET Client, we did release 2.5.0 last week, which includes all of the updates that we've talked about in the last couple demo days. The Z indexing changes, some of the changes with copy and paste, just general improvements. There was a small bug identified in 2.5.0 that's being addressed. We have an internal pre-release that's out that addresses that. And another feature that's in the pre-release is some adjustments to, I don't know if anyone's had problems with their command window hanging at times. So we're making some improvements there. We found a new edge case that Andrew was able to recreate that still has that problem. So that's still on the list. But I'm hopeful that we'll have a 2.6.0 out probably within the next week or so that should address both that bug that was found in 2.5.0 and the command window desync issue. So that's exciting. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to preview a new feature for Portal where we allow self-service email reset for customers. So if you're at the login page, this can be enabled per login. So if a particular customer wanted this and another did not, we expose this reset password link optionally. So if you click that, then you'll be prompted for your username. This is set up to only allow password resets for Rover portal users, so customers of our customers. So if I were to try to use this to reset the password for a base Rover account, you'll receive an error message that it isn't allowed. If I go and use one of my email addresses that's associated with a portal user, and I click request password reset, you get a message saying an email has been sent to you with instructions. So then let me hop over and open that email. So this is currently what the email looks like. Again, this is pretty new. We may make some adjustments to the look and feel of this before this goes live, but includes a general message. Someone requested password reset. If that wasn't you, you may want to reach out to support. You have a pretty button, and you can also copy and paste the link. So if I click on that, that will open a new browser window, and it's prompting me to enter the new password. I think I fat fingered it. It will. If you don't have passwords the same, it will warn you. So now we have set our new password, and we can go ahead and log in with that new password. So this should just be a quality life for our customers who are using Portal for their customers. They now no longer have to reset those passwords individually for their users upon request. So that is my update, and I think we're going to hand it over to Mike now.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Just as a call out too, it's the host side system that's sending the email, right? Or at least providing some instruction there. So it goes out
That's correct.
labeled. Yeah. So for them to do it, they have to turn on the functionality. They also need to have mail control set up on their system, right? So that their host system is able to send emails. But yeah, some exciting stuff there. All right, I'll share my screen here, but I'm hoping a lot of you saw this email, knowing there's something called command runner coming. Is there anybody who feels comfortable taking a guess at what this might be, specific to Rover systems? And if you already know the answer, you can't cheat. Nobody wants to venture a guess? Someone's got to be brave enough. Wow. Okay. Not even sarcastic. Gonna let us run a command in the system because it's called command runner.
So Curtis provided the sarcasm.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks,
You
Matt.
just didn't want to come up and use it. Got to deliver it on microphone, Curtis. Sarcasm doesn't translate in text very well, man. Yeah, so a cool thing about Rover, right? And this is nothing new, but the form definitions for all of the things, all the screens that live in the application, the stuff is defined in data on the host side. And because it's defined in data, that means we can interact with it through API calls, and that means we can do stuff with the response that we get. This is not necessarily a new concept. It's very similar to a project that we had rolling for some time in Zoom Assist 2.0 that I think kind of cautioned us away from maybe attempting to do this because of some of the technical complexity around trying to re-leverage the data for form definitions to deliver interfaces in a different forum, in this case, the web. But the reality is the landscape is basically changed for us now, right? Something that took, literally Pete and Christian for 2 years were dedicated on a project to do the same thing with a different technical stack before it got to the point where you had something to show for it. It's not a 2-year project anymore. So a couple of weeks ago, we fired up a little proof of concept just to say, hey, provided the ability to get a PD record and a PD design record through an API call, could we have a thing living in the web app that re-rendered those UIs on the web, right? A command runner. And spoiler alert, right? We're all here talking about it because the answer is yes. And the answer was yes in a pretty quick fashion. So this is what we've got now. We have not launched this yet into the test environment. So of course it's not yet in production, but we're past like proof of concept territory here and into like, rounding this out to be functional enough to release into the wild. So here you can see I passed it bill.e, and it took the bill.e definition and rendered a pretty close equivalent out here in the web. Including getting some of the benefit of things that we've done elsewhere in the web already, like defining lookups and having those associated with Rover inputs, right? Like this lookup seems to have a little bit of a funky definition there, but like over here, I can get the full effect of the description. So we probably have a typo on the bill ID lookup one, right? But the other nice thing you get too, if you've got help text, right? We've got help text flowing through. I mean, all of the components of the form that make the form in terms of how it's rendered out on the desktop, that stuff is available now to this rendering engine to generate for the web. So why haven't we launched it yet? Still round out some of the translation that it's doing to try to make it look and feel closer to equivalent. The other thing too is it's leveraging APIs to talk back to the system. So there's still some work on the back end to go through and plumb up the APIs for it. Bill.e, if we try to look up a record here, this will not work because the API endpoint stuff is not all wired for it. But if I pop over to ap.e, which is right a much more complicated form, here we go. I've got my AP equivalent, and the latest breakthrough was around placement of grouped fields. There's still a little bit of it's got totaling for miscellaneous charges flipped with the lines for it, but generally it's rendering this out into the web. And I can come and I can do a lookup here. So we'll do lookup for invoice 123. We'll select that guy. And I've loaded this AP record up into the web, right? This is real data out of this particular record pulled up into that web interface, right? Invoice date August 6, 25, August 6, 25. This is big, right? Because this allows us to fast track this initial focus of just getting parity for web forms or desktop forms into the web. Because it effectively means we don't need to go through and recreate all of the interfaces by hand on the web. Now we can leverage those definitions as they exist in the desktop. Like I said, there's still wood to chop around the look and feel and polish of like how it's translating the UI, but it's been just as the initial proof of concept was very quick to land, iterating on the translation that it's applying to the design spec to create the web UI has also been pretty fast moving too. So like that's only going to continue to improve. And on the back end of it, right, the need to be refactoring the forms to have the right validation layer so that all of that same logic can be accessed through an API call, like, we're far down that path. It's not complete for the system, but it's come a long way. And as that continues to evolve, that's going to, that's just going to drive usability and more of these things too. A cool thing, like, this whole concept just opens up so much potential utility for us, provided a few things like right validation layer, right, the implementation of a form done correctly and to what the system wants to have a validation program instead of putting all the logic into the QM program directly behind the form. Like all that stuff is big because if you consider it's making an API call here to get the PD and PD design records from the dev system. Same as when I'm on the desktop and I'm saying load ap.e, it's giving me the dev account on that system's version of ap.e, right? That's been compiled on the system and built by, out of Studio and compiled for the .NET client to run. We're using the same things, which then means if I'm logged into the ZoomAssist system and I go run a custom ZoomAssist command, I'm going to get the PD record for that command from that system, which is great. Because you're also then looking at some of these customer systems where it's like a bunch of custom screen generation has happened. How can we leverage that stuff for the web? And there was, a path forward for that previously, but there was some friction around that because you're talking about having to glom standard product things into custom things, and to be able to handle, the web interface is handling both of those scenarios dynamically. And here it almost doesn't matter because it's building the interface from scratch based off of what the host system is telling it wants, right? So if we could do that, because we know we have the PD and PD designs everywhere, then the thing that it's got to have coupled with that is the ability to go execute the business logic behind the form, whatever that custom logic might look like, which is where the whole API conversation comes in. And a lot of work's happened on that side. There's a spreadsheet Andrew's got tracking all of this. You've heard about like the need to finish Rover's APIs for a while. That's not a new thing for us, but this scenario is now yet another scenario where that work being complete becomes even more important because, right, for the form to work, it's got to be able to talk to the system and know that the right logic is occurring to talk to the system. Because it is a little bit different. Not a little bit, it is a different messaging layer from how the desktop clients would talk to the system in terms of having a persistent telnet or SSH and just piping communication back and forth constantly when they need things. Now it's all driven by REST API calls, which is still where you want to be because those REST APIs have utility for so many other reasons, right? But I think this is really cool. So pause there for questions and feedback. Am I alone in thinking this is really cool, or is this making sense to everybody?
This is amazing.
It's magical. It's really cool.
If I could tag on just a little bit, if next for the engineers here, I'm totally okay holding some time at the end of next week's mod call to kind of, if someone has questions and wants to get a little more technical, like we can talk a little bit about that next week. So I know I think of questions about 5 minutes after our call ends. So if that's you too, just come prepared on Tuesday, I think it is.
I love that idea because clearly this shapes, the direction we take moving forward as we're touching these systems, right? Making sure we're generating FDICs appropriately, building the forms correctly, building the validation subroutines and post routines correctly so that they can be reused for all these things. But it genuinely puts you into a spot where like you could be designing a form in Studio knowing that someone's not going to have to reinvent that definition somewhere else now, right? Instead of that being code that in theory just would be obsoleted at some point. Now you kind of know that thing actually will drive all of this stuff too, so it doesn't have to go away, provided you follow the right path on implementing it to begin with, right? Because it's, there is still a path. So those conversations I think become really important. But this is really exciting stuff because it changes the game entirely for us. So I expect that we'll have this thing released into production in the next month or two, genuinely, with how quick this is evolving. Even if that means we're having to put some restriction around the PDs, and we won't call them PDs when it launches, right? We'll make this cleaner, but if there's some restriction around the commands that people can run, because we don't necessarily want someone to come in and say like, oh, give me MRK control, right? Like that's a thing I can do right now because that's a PD on the system. And as the rendering evolves, this look and feel will get better and look to match like what's in MRK control, but you're going to need to have APIs available to interact with MRK control. And like, are we going to have all of that stuff refactored on the host side in the next month or two? Probably not. So it's just like, I see us kind of gatekeeping, restricting some of the commands that you can run to some extent, which is okay because you're still getting the net benefit of having this thing out there and being able to create more of a surface area for people to ship their work over to just being web-based. And yeah, it changes everything. If you walk away from this call with any other thoughts occurring to you or questions or comments or whatever, my door, as always, is open, right? Ignore the team status. Just send me a message. I'm happy to spend some time talking about this or whatever we might connect into this conversation with any of you. Mod Call is a great forum for it. If you don't like doing it in front of the big group, let me know. Spend some one-on-one time. But yeah, thanks for following along.